What's up, guys? Rancel here. World 15 Nightmare had been released 3 months ago. After playing it, I realized that my previous video about Beth didn't fully cover her story, and perhaps my theory in that video were wrong. So, what really happened to Beth after the event of World 13? What were the things I missed in my previous video? Well, without further ado, let's dive into the explanation of Beth's story. In my previous video, I explained what Beth had done in Season 1, starting from creating chaos among tainted beings to sending the Knight to another dimension, so he couldn't interfere with her plans anymore. However, all of those efforts turned out to be in vain. Beth became depressed and started wandering around the demon world while drunk. When she was resting in trash area, she was found by 2 kind janitors who were concerned about her situation. They helped Beth get a job as a janitor and unintentionally persuaded her to live among tainted beings. Not long after, a sudden terrorist attack led by the imposter Knight occurred in the building where Beth worked. Beth used her powers to help the tainted beings survive the attack. Once the attack was successfully subdued, Beth returned to her job as a janitor and continued living among tainted beings. And that, I thought, was where Beth's story ended. But unfortunately, I was wrong. It seems like there's some group of people decided to continue her suffering. In World 15 Nightmare, we see that Beth is still depressed. Not only that, she's also broke and dying. She's broke because she spent all of her money on alcohol, and she's dying because she actually needs antibodies to prevent her body from melting due to mana poisoning. This made me realize that Beth actually isn't immune to mana poisoning. I thought she was, since she hadn't been wearing an invader mask the entire time. This world also tells us how the 2 janitors really changed Beth to be a better person. When she hears that the invaders are about to attack the Lilith Tower, Beth initially ignored it, but as she remembers those 2, she decides to go investigate. Beth then confronts them and asks what they are planning. Sadly, Beth's arrival is not greeted well. They start to mock Beth, calling her a deserter and a traitor, and intend to kill Beth. After telling Beth that they want to destroy Demon City and blow up Lilith Tower, where the 2 janitors work, Beth prepares to fight them. The invaders are quickly defeated and Beth wins the fight. But her condition worsens. Luckily, Beth is rescued by Ron, the CEO of Cyber Robotics Corporation, also known as the Father. However, Ron's help isn't actually free. He wants Beth to infiltrate the invaders' main ship and gather information for him. To make her interested in helping, he tells Beth that her consciousness might not actually reside in her brain. He wasn't lying when he said that, due to the fact that Beth's consciousness resonance index is only at 3% and her brain waves remain stable despite having neurons that don't match her body at all. This means either Beth's brain isn't functioning properly or her consciousness is located somewhere else. This raises the possibility that her body is being remotely controlled, or that her true consciousness is being held by someone. To confirm this, they need to retrieve all the data from the invaders. Considering she wants to live longer and uncover the truth, Beth decides to cooperate with him. She then starts infiltrate the ship and begins her mission. While carrying out her mission, Beth meets a little girl named Cindy who's being chased by the invaders. Beth initially doesn't want to help her, let alone care about her. But because she continuously begged to follow Beth, she ultimately has no choice but to let her. The 2 of them then work together, with Cindy acting as Beth's guide. As time goes on, Beth becomes closer to Cindy and starts caring about her, unlike in the first time they met. Their bond grows even stronger, to the point where Beth saves Cindy from a deadly robot, despite knowing it will hurt her. After the robot is defeated, Cindy takes care of Beth's wound and lets her rest for a while. When Beth wakes up, she finds herself in Cindy's care. Beth then asks Cindy, why is she still following her? Knowing Cindy's objective was to leave the ship, Cindy replies that she won't leave until Beth decides to leave either. Annoyed by her answer, Beth asks again, what does Cindy think Beth is? And Cindy replies, Beth is her savior sent by Lord Valinus at desperate time. When Beth hears the phrase, desperate time, she suddenly remembers that she never thanked the 2 janitors who helped her. Once Beth's condition gets better, They continue their journey to the central room to complete the task Ron has given. In their journey, you can visit Invaders' archives. In there, you can check one of the documents that reveals Beth was actually fired. This new information makes me realize I was wrong in my previous video. You see, in my previous video, I said it was impossible for Beth to be fired because what she did was really beneficial for the Savior. When Beth drifted the knight to another world, that alternate world created Future Princess. Without Future Princess, the knight wouldn't have been saved, and that would go against the Savior's purpose, as the knight is needed to break the loop. I also stated that Beth herself came up with the plan to drift the knight, right? But after I researched further, I've started to think differently. So, the scenario wasn't like this. Beth was angry because the knight kept thwarting her plans. Therefore, she came up with the idea to drift the knight to another world and asked for Savior's approval to carry out her idea. Instead, it might have been like this. Beth was frustrated by the knight always ruining her plans. Therefore, Savior influenced Beth to drift the knight to another world. I changed my mind about this because after checking Alter Knight's dialogue, I noticed Beth always ends up fighting Alter Knight in Ra Empire, but she consistently loses and dies. There's one version of Beth from previous world who also tried to drift Knight to another world. However, she was beheaded before she could cast the spell. This means that perhaps the plan came from Savior, not Beth. I'm still not completely sure though, because both scenarios seem plausible.
Okay, then why did Beth still get fired?
Well, I think it's because the General Headquarters Disciplinary Committee of the Invaders saw Beth's plan as merely wasting resources since the knight returned safely after 3 months. Beth and other invaders didn't know the real motive behind why the knight needed to be sent to another world. Only Savior knew it. Another possible reason was that Savior intentionally fired Beth through the disciplinary committee for certain purpose. It's quite sad for Beth because Savior was also involved in the plan, but only Beth who suffers the consequences.
Oh, poor Beth. Why didn't Savior explain his real motive or stop Beth's firing? Didn't he care about Beth in World 11 Nightmare? And why is no one suspicious of the Savior for allowing Beth to use those massive amount of crystals?
Actually, there is one invader who is suspicious of him, the 12th Corps commander. He sensed something was wrong with Savior's decisions, but because Savior is the Savior, most of the invaders ignored 12th Commander's suspicion and blindly trusted the Savior. As for why the Savior didn't stop Beth's firing or explain his real motive, I'll cover that in another video because I have interesting theory about it. For now, let's continue the story. After Beth finishes hacking the last security system, Cindy unfortunately gets caught by the invaders led by Volt. Volt tells Cindy that Beth was actually a cruel invader commander, and there's no way she will save her. Cindy doesn't believe that and screams for Beth's help, but with a heavy heart, Beth ignores her and decides to continue her mission. Through her efforts, Beth successfully copies all the information from the invader's central computer and obtains antibody. All she has to do now is escape. However, Beth still feels guilty for abandoning Cindy. Not wanting to be seen as a caring person, she swaps that guilt to anger towards Volt who mocked her and intends to kill him. While Beth is searching for Volt, he unexpectedly shows up in front of her. He then releases AMMI, a deadly robot, to kill Beth for his promotion. With her power and agility, Beth battles the robot and ultimately wins the fight. When the robot explodes, it reveals that Cindy was inside of it. Cindy tells Beth she's sorry for not listening to her not to get her hopes up. Beth doesn't mind that and tells Cindy her real name so she won't call her Savior anymore. At that moment, Beth shows her great development as a character. How could it not be? The name given by her beloved mother was very important to her. Even to her comrades of the same race who had fought alongside her, Beth did not want to give her name. Yet, to a little girl she had just met, who came from a race she considered tainted, she willingly gave it. My heart was touched when I saw this cut scene after I delved into it, and it's enough to make a man like me cry. Unfortunately, Volt returns not long after that, expecting to find Beth's dead body lying on the floor. To his surprise, Beth is actually still alive. However, her condition is already weak. Realizing the situation, Beth intends to break the taboo and transform into her dragon form. Knowing what about to happen, Camilla intervenes and sends both Beth and Cindy back to the Demon City. As a result, Beth completes her mission and saves Cindy from the invaders, though both of them are dying. They then return to Ron's place to hand over the copied informations and heal their wounds. Upon arrival, Beth and Cindy have different wishes. Beth wants Ron to save Cindy first, while Cindy wants the opposite, but Ron knows for sure he cannot save both of them. Fortunately, I guess, he comes up with a brilliant idea. Sort of. Based on the information they got from the invaders, the antibody requires tainted race body. With Cindy's agreement, Ron decides to use her body to create antibody to save Beth and transfer Cindy's brain or her consciousness into a robot to save her. In this way, Ron manages to save them both. Knowing that the antibody will only keep Beth alive temporarily, he places her in a hibernation tube to maintain her condition, intending to use her for certain purpose in the future. And that marks the ending of the story from our villain, Beth. At least for now. Alright, we've already covered the story. Now it's time for theory. Why does Ron want Beth to live? What will happen to Beth after she is put into the hibernation tube? Okay, for the first question, based on Ron's monologue, I believe he wants to use Beth as a vessel for the incarnation of the demon god, which would serve as the core of the new world he intends to create. To strengthen my theory, take a look at this cutscene from World 14 Nightmare. Ron said he needed Claude for his plan. And seeing Beth in the hibernation tube reminds me of Claude's wife, for whom Claude conducted many experiments to cure her of Belial's curse. For the second question, Beth will live, that's for sure. It's different from previous world where Beth died in the hand of our main character. In my optimistic theory, Beth will become the vessel for Belial, but Ron will fail to manipulate her to become his tool. She and Cindy will then escape from his laboratory with newfound power. On the other hand, my pessimistic theory suggests that Beth will be sacrificed for Ron's plan, leading to both her and Cindy's demise. Nevertheless, keep in mind what I just said is only a theory, or a hypothesis I should say, and it all comes from a wild imagination of a mere player. So guys, don't stop theorizing until we find the truth of the lore of Guardian Tales. Okay, thank you for watching. See you in the next video.
Wait, what about Beth's consciousness?
I still don't know about that. What do you guys think about Beth's consciousness? Let's theorize it in the comment.